My name is Chris Duffy. I'm part of Cisco, particularly on the Splunk side of the house. So I focus my group essentially focuses around industrial solutions and how to help customers in specific verticals or industries leverage Splunk within those environments, especially tied to particular concerns such as OT security, operational insights, and things like that. So what we're going to cover as far as this presentation is we're going to first really just focus on some of our integrations with our existing technology. So we're going to focus specifically around our integration with Cyber Vision. But we want to take a step back real quick and just understand some of the landscape and kind of some of the focus. So what we're seeing is a lot of organizations are no longer, often they're multinational, global, and they're trying to get even if they're not multinational, they have multiple facilities. And so they're trying to get this visibility across multiple sites, across multiple countries and geographies. And that's presenting a challenge. So some of the challenges that they run into is around just making sure you have the latest threat intel and detections, making sure that's consistent across your organization so that you have the same level of visibility and capabilities. Also, we see a lot of organizations struggle with kind of the more manual site-by-site updates situation. So that could be everything from understanding all the assets in the environments to managing vulnerabilities. That often leads to some of these kind of blind spots or areas of where you don't have visibility. For example, if you're just maintaining spreadsheets and things for asset inventory, someone replaces a device or a device is no longer being used, all that remains in your manual process. And so we see a lot of organizations wanting to move to a more dynamic manner to be able to do things and manage vulnerabilities and detections. Also, a lot of organizations, especially when executives and things, they're getting asked questions about this more often. Sometimes it's by insurance providers or things like that, or their board. And so they want to be able to really have this aggregated view of their cyber risk. That could be across IT and OT both, or really in the OT environment. And so that security governance, that kind of understanding what is my overall risk, what is going on in my environment, where do I need to focus? They're struggling with that, especially again, as they look at multi-site or sometimes even multiple industries. We have, for example, electric companies that also have natural gas resources and things like that. So trying to get that aggregated view across all their OT environments or site-by-site can sometimes be a challenge. So some of this is part of the capability of Cisco Cyber Vision. And so just briefly, if you're not familiar with Cyber Vision is a sensor that can be deployed down on your switches and your devices to be able to get visibility, particularly from an OT context. So that's everything from asset detection to vulnerability detection to security detections as well. And so it allows you to essentially deploy a sensor down on the switch. So you don't have to do separate tapping or spanning or anything like that to get insights from Cyber Vision. And within Cyber Vision, there's this capability called Site Manager. What that allows you to do is manage these multiple sites from a centralized console. So that allows you to be able to understand, the state of what's checking in, what's not checking in, trying to get over those silos, making sure that you're having a consistent threat detection and intelligence capability, and then also doing things like augmenting that with geolocation. So, incident response or just contextual information like the physical location provides a lot of value for cyber teams for their OT environments. And so Site Manager, Cisco Cyber Vision Site Manager allows you to start doing that. You can see some of the example here of this multi-site management where they have the different sensors all coming in into a centralized location. And then you can do things like understanding whether the health of those, whether they're connected. You can manage your licenses. But again, kind of more from that management and understanding of the overall health and of that environment, or managing things like licenses and capabilities. So that allows you that ability to manage all that. Where this often gets tied in is when you're now looking at additional visibility. How do I tie these sites together? How do I tie the data coming from these sites together to understand holistic? And that's typically done, that's often done within the Splunk product. And so there's a couple things that are probably important to understand here. and that is we have our Cisco, we have Cyber Vision add-on, and then we have a Cyber Vision app. Now, the add-on is something that most people, unless you're like a Splunk administrator, probably don't deal with. It is all about getting the data in and then making sure it's mapped to data models, data parsing and things like that. Most of the time, that's something like a Splunk admin or a special person might do to basically bring the data in. We will cover that because it's important from several aspects, but I also want to show you how easy it is to bring in the data. The Cyber Vision app is where you're more likely to actually interact. That's the dashboards, the reports, the searches, all that kind of custom navigation. That's really in the Cyber Vision app. So that's more the front facing, the UI capabilities and things like that is within the Cyber Vision app. Now, where the Cyber Vision add-on is important is it provides a couple of dual capabilities. One, it maps the data to the Cyber Vision app. The other thing is, if you are, for example, looking at more like a SIEM solution, or you have a SOC that's going to manage this, and Cyber Vision is one of those many data sources, the Cyber Vision add-on also makes it compliant with Splunk's Enterprise Security. That's our SIEM product, and our OT Security add-on. So no matter where you are on that journey, if you're just starting out and you're just going to use the Cyber Vision app, the add-on's going to be valuable. But then once, ideally you mature to a certain stage, then that's the Cyber Vision add-on is also going to give you the built-in capabilities for those other premium SIEM products. So if we talk about the add-on, so again, this is about getting the data in. And so I wanted to show you really how easy this is. So essentially, this is a view from the add-on, where if you notice on the top right, you have this create new input. So that's basically where you say, I want to pull in this case, the example given is events, or I want to pull in vulnerabilities or the devices. Essentially, all it takes is coming in here, creating a new input. You're going to specify how often you collect that data or how often you check for updates. And then you'll provide an index. An index is basically where does the data get stored. And then you'll provide an account. Now that account is linked to an API key and a particular Cyber Vision center. And then you'll notice the start date here is grayed out. That's because we're updating. You can also have the capability to say, you know what, when we stood this up, we were still troubleshooting, figuring things out. So maybe I don't want anything past last November. And so this allows you to basically specify a start date of, we're going to begin starting collecting date from this time on, this date and time. And then the add-on will keep track of updates. So if it queried 5 minutes ago, it knows to request data in the last 5 minutes. And so it really is that easy of, providing the API key in the host, and then you come in and you configure these inputs to bring the data in. Like I said, just wanted to mostly show kind of how easy really that process is. Most of what we'll focus on is really the app. And so what is the app going to give you holistically, the Cyber Vision app? One, it's going to give you data from all those deployments centrally, so you're going to be able to aggregate it. You're going to be able to look at each individual site if you want. You'll get the operational security overview, vulnerabilities. You can do things like scheduling reports. So maybe, every day or every week you get some kind of report on vulnerabilities or new assets or things like that. It allows you that capability to do that. That's kind of at a high level. We'll jump more into this as well as a demo showing you how this all works as well. But those are just kind of the high level capabilities of that Cyber Vision Splunk app. So one of those views is that global center. So in this example, we have 4 different sites coming into one site. We can see all the states of the various sensors, but then we can also get a breakdown of various kind of components that we'll dive into in the demo. As I mentioned, you can also get a focus view. So if let's say you're a site manager and you just want to look at what's the security posture of your site, you can do that as well. And then you can also do the same thing for your operational security events. And that'll be a mixture of both things that are happening on the Cyber Vision host, say someone logs into it, as well as actual security detections and events as well. And you can see some examples here of a particular event, and Splunk has already tied that together in a graphical manner. So you can start seeing the relationship between the objects here. You, of course, can pull in the assets and be able to see everything you know about the assets they're pulling in, who they're talking to, and protocols and things like that. And then there's a vulnerabilities panel as well to be able to understand, what's your overall security posture, or again, by site, to allows you to focus, figure out where to go. You also have the ability to bring in syslog data. Now, the syslog data is really restricted to those more operational security events. It's not going to be all the asset information or the vulnerabilities beyond that a vulnerability was detected. Um, it's really designed for more of a real-time kind of detection. And I'll put an important caveat on that, because when we work with customers, when we ask them, well, how soon do you need to know when it happens? They're almost always going to say, I need to know right away. What we often suggest, though, is, well, let's take a look at your process. How often would you even come and look at these alerts, or that you'd be notified? How long is it going to take you to do some investigation, or be able to, take that information and do something with it? So what we often find is it's not actually quite needed in real time. It may be every minute, it may be every 5 minutes, 15. It just kind of depends on your process. But if you do have that need to look at it as soon as it comes in, the syslog capability is going to allow you, especially on the security and eventing um, kind of aspect or view. Understand you can also mix and match them. So maybe you still want to pull in the assets and the vulnerabilities using that method, the API, but you want the events to come in real time. So you can do both. It kind of just depends on what your needs, what's realistic to your organization. And so from here, we'll dive into the demo. We'll look at these a little bit more in depth. So as I mentioned, this is really the global overview here. So this is, in this case, we have 5 different facilities that are all reporting in. I have the ability, if I want to drill down, I can. I have a few options in terms of, like, do I want to include devices that, haven't checked in for more than 30 days? Maybe those are false positives. And after 30 days, if it hasn't checked in, we don't have any data from it, then okay, then it's probably gone. So you have the ability to turn on a few toggles. We're going to get a breakdown of, like in this case, the number of assets that these centers have detected. Notice there's not always a 1-for-1. So in the case of, like, the bakery, we have 10 sensors and 109 devices. We look at District 3, there's actually only one sensor, but it's detected over 1,000 devices. That's going to vary basically on your environment and how it's architected in the network. We can get a breakdown in terms of, we have a lot of, for example, this plant 2 that are not actually reporting in the sensors. So maybe I need to go, that might be an operational issue. Maybe there's an issue with the center, or something going on at that site that I might need to be aware. Um, also a breakdown of things like devices that have external communications by site. So I have a lot more at this territory 1 than I do at the bakery here. As well as if I have devices, for instance, using clear test credentials. Most of these you can also see, you can drill down to different views. And then we can also view it from risk. So Cyber Vision provides essentially a risk score for assets, and that's a combination of quality. So it might include things like vulnerabilities, but it's also going to be based on activity and things like that. So this allows you to use the risks that they do, as well as a breakdown of the individual sensors. A lot of these are that Plant 2 Acme, right? And then I can also do things like look at this geographically to be able to understand, where is this located? What center is it part of? Is it, if it's red, that means it's not checking in as we'd expected, versus green is good. So you have all those capabilities to look at this from a global level. Then you can also look at this more at a particular site level. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that bakery, and we're going to understand what is the security posture, what is going on in those devices. So for example, I'm starting to have devices that are not checking in. I don't have any new devices, but I can also see in terms of the breakdown of my vulnerabilities, I have 18 high. So that might be, again, that may be where I focus my efforts, because I'll go after the critical ones first, as well as understanding of, like, okay, these are the devices with the most vulnerability. So again, area where I can focus my effort. And then again, the breakdown of the sensors and geography as well. I can also look at those operational security insights. So as I mentioned, this is a combination of both operational events in the console as well as security events. So if I had specific detections or things like that, like malware, those would also be included. And then again, I can break it down by severity or particular kinds of categorization of incidents. And so, for instance, we see, hey, there was a large uptick, at least comparatively, on March 3rd for medium impact. Again, I may not care about that because I'm only focused on critical and high. And then I can get down, of course, the breakdown between different centers as well as the actual events. So you notice, for instance, like, okay, these are some imports. This is someone logging into the console, right? Those are different kinds of events. No security detections in this particular environment. Um, but then you can also do things like starting to tie things together. So here's that login of that user. And I can do that either from like a user level, or I can look at it more in terms of like from a particular source. I can see all the assets that I have in my environment. Notice I can again do some additional filtering here. So maybe I don't want something like ARP messages or things like that. So I can either show all the protocols, or I can do non-common. Now, what is non-common is there'll be a couple things that come out of the box, but if you have one that you want to add, you can just basically go adjust it and add it to a list, and you'll be able to filter out those. We're going to get a breakdown in terms of like what are the actual kinds of devices, the vendors, what's the risk, and then devices that when their last activity was, and then a breakdown of the actual thing. And in some cases, it's going to provide more. So like if I go here, it's providing specific informations on the models and things like that, the vendors. So again, whatever Cyber Vision is able to detect and bring back, as well as like the number of vulnerabilities, for instance, detected on a particular device. So that's another way of just like centralizing, having that more dynamic asset inventory based on data. And then the last one we'll focus or we'll talk about is that vulnerability. So Cyber Vision will do a number of vulnerability detections based on various attributes and characteristics, but then you'll get you'll get a breakdown of that. So for instance, if I go down here, I see what are some of these particular vulnerabilities, links, things like that as well. Notice that this is broken between all vulnerabilities as well as specific firmware vulnerabilities. You know, firmware vulnerabilities are often a little bit more of a manual and a harder kind of thing to apply. So again, I might want to separate those firmware from just general vulnerabilities across the system. And then, of course, breaking down. So I have a lot of, for example, I have some vulnerable controllers, but I also have a lot of devices with routing capability that, so switches, routers, things like that, right? As well as like a breakdown of the what kind of firmware vulnerabilities do I have. So that's kind of a breakdown of like all this comes essentially using the add-on that is then used to feed the app here. And so if you use Cyber Vision or you're looking at it, this just gives you a really big or a really quick idea of like, here's some of the insights and views that you can have out of the box within by leveraging Splunk together with it. Which gets to my other last part of this presentation, and that's okay. Let's say you want to move to that next stage in the maturity journey. So you want to be able to, okay, I'm looking at doing SIM. What can I do with Splunk? What can I do with the Cyber Vision data? So traditionally, Splunk is used more on the left side of this, so in the corporate environment, right? And then we've already talked about we have Cisco Cyber Vision. Cyber Vision is going to provide visibility capabilities that Splunk just does not have natively. And so it's going to provide, again, especially on PLCs, RTUs, things like that, it's going to provide a lot of visibility that is just not native within Splunk, but is important. So what we do when we want to roll this out to either an IT OT converged SOC or just an OT SOC is we're actually going to extend that security suite across the rest of the environment. So Splunk already has a lot of native capabilities around, networking equipment, firewalls, antivirus, security events. It already has a lot of capabilities. So we're going to extend that. This shows the converge, but just understand it could be just over an OT as well. And what's going to happen is we're going to take all the best of that security suite. We're going to pair that up with Cisco Cyber Vision and the data and insights it provides, and all that goes into what's called our OT security add-on for enterprise security, so our SIM. So all this data comes into one place, and where this is valuable is if you want to look beyond just say the data coming from Cyber Vision, you want to look at your firewalls, you want to look at your other data sources in the environment. This is really where it's going to be all tied together versus just focusing on particular aspects like with Cyber Vision. And specifically what it's going to include is it is going to include a unified data model. So this provides context around assets. So this is a jump server versus a machine in the control center. Response will differ. And so the data models allow us to then bring in that context. It's going to allow you to get started faster. So a lot of pre-built use cases like perimeter monitoring, endpoint protection, monitoring USB drives. It's going to give you a lot of additional security frameworks. We already use MITRE ATT&CK, Killchain, and others, but this adds MITRE ATT&CK for ICS. There's features here that allow you to mitigate the risk around assets. So these hosts should only have these applications installed, or these services should be disabled. You can actually build the baselines and monitor that within Splunk. And then, of course, we're going to include a lot of detections and use cases as well. And so, this is more where you want to incorporate it into the SIEM. If you're not there yet, there's a lot of great capabilities, as I showed already, with the integration with Cyber Vision.